Hello, everyone, and welcome to part two of Sacred Minds Navigating Mental Health in Ministry. I'm Cameron Cunningham, Mental Health and Wellness Program Coordinator with the National Benevolent Association of the Christian Church Disciples of Christ. In session one, we've named the weight and the silent toll that ministry can take on clergy and spiritual leaders. Now we shift towards the question, what can we do? This session is entitled Building Cultures of Care. Solutions and Sacred Support. And in this session, we will explore how ministers, chaplains, lay leaders, and all faith rooted caregivers can create rhythms and communities of support that not only sustain them, but affirm that they too are worthy of care. As we stated before, we're doing this series specifically because even healers need healing. So in this second session, we will move from awareness to action. And we will focus on what does it look like to create peer support networks that break the cycles of isolation. We will focus on emphasizing mental health training that equips both clergy and congregations. We will focus on encouraging open, intentional space for dialogue and listening that dismantles stigma and shame within faith communities on all levels. And lastly, we will embrace the sacred responsibility of self care and boundaries as vital acts of ministry sustainability. None of these ideas are brand new, but the difference is introduced when we just don't know them, but we practice them. So let's get started today. We'll begin with looking at four solutions and cultures of care, but we'll begin with number one, establishing peer support networks, creating intentional community. It's no secret that one of the most effective protective factors against loneliness and isolation within clergy is real, authentic connection. In fact, one of the most life-giving resources that clergy can cultivate is relationship with other clergy. Because clergy are oftentimes left to feel like no one understands the pressures being carried. So the shared affinity and the ministerial connection with people who understand is simply a healing act. Maybe it's a group text with trusted peers, or a scheduled monthly Zoom call, or even a small peer design and led group that becomes a safe space. It doesn't matter what it looks like. Connection is important. And the truth is, all of us who are clergy can begin to have even greater connection today by taking the step to lead in creating maybe a small text thread or sending out a few calendar invites to propose some standard meetups to receive and provide support. Again, these intentional networks, it doesn't matter if they meet weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, or even quarterly. What matters most is the authentic connection. Because again, we're all in need of a shared experience where we're not required to be on, but we have the space and the grace to simply be. So ministry doesn't have to be lonely, and it never should be. So who can you invite to start a peer support group? What format in this season of your life fits your schedule? Maybe it's text, maybe it's Zoom, maybe you're looking for that in-person connection, maybe it's in person. And then lastly, when can you and your network begin to meet? Maybe it's next week, maybe it's next month. Think through those things. While you think, we'll turn to our second solution, which is mental health resources and training specifically for clergy. We've named in session one that ministry is sacred work, but it's not absent from the emotional taxing toll. There are many hidden burdens, there are spouts with depression and anxiety, and there are seasons of burnout that leave many unclear on where they can access and even utilize personalized help without being judged or stigmatized. As you see right now on the screen, on the slides, according to Barna research, many pastors facing mental health challenges, they don't access or even utilize resources because of the lack of understanding and sufficient access to the available resources. So this underlines and it shouts to us that the work begins with normalizing the use of mental health resources as a part of being faithful in your ministerial journey. This may include seeking therapy and counseling that you know is confidential, or maybe forming partnerships with professionals who understand your particular church culture and the cultural nuances of your particular faith setting. And I like this one, but another potentiality may be to sit down with your board, with your ministerial team, and design rest covenants or policies that are enforced and maintained. Because for you, A major part of your calling is not just to tend to the soul of others, but as a clergy, it's also to tend to the needs of your own self. It is equally important that you're able to recognize the signs within self, just as you identify in others while you're in servant mode. And I will go to the next slide to just show that, again, this is all about clergy having emotional awareness and mental health as a priority in their lives. Because when you value to the utmost emotional awareness and mental health, you're not just only a better pastor or just a better leader, you're a healthier, happier person. So this is not just about knowledge, it's about creating and building a culture of holistic care. So, mental health training that equips clergy to recognize early warning signs and emotional stress within self and even connect or self refer to professional care is of the utmost importance. Let's keep moving. Now to our third solution, which is encouraging mental health conversations at every level in the church life. For many, church is a place where they expect to find family, healing, community, and even restoration. But for this to be a true reality, a full reality, faith spaces must function as spaces where mental health is openly named, deeply discussed, and welcomed and embraced in the light of grace. It's not just enough for you as a pastor to have mental awareness, but it is necessary for everyone involved in the care in the community systems to understand how stigma works and to most importantly understand how stigma shrinks the capacity of vulnerability. So, from the pastor to the ushers, from the ushers to the elders to the deacons to the youth to all lay leadership, it is important to have an understanding around how stigma operates and how it is critical to building cultures of communal care. The word stigma, it originates from the Greek word that literally means to mark, to brand, or to tattoo. It comes this as an idea from the ancient Greek society, where a mark was placed on a slave or criminal to publicly dehumanize them and to signify that they were of lesser value within a particular social structure or milieu. The same principle and dynamics play out today when leaders are judged for utilizing therapy, or clergy are looked at as unprepared because they take Sabbath or sabbaticals, or even when clergy have to sit in silence and struggle with depression and anxiety because it's been framed as spiritual weakness. Stigma is still a mark that is being placed on Jesus, placed on people, and it is surely not the way of Jesus. So here's how stigma shows up in our communities, and it involves what I call a four-part downward spiral. First, stigma leads to shame. It's the internalized sense that something is wrong with me. And then that shame leads to withdrawal, where a person stops talking and then they stop showing up. And then that withdrawal leads to even deeper isolation, where individuals choose more and more time alone with themselves, and they choose to utilize spaces with others much more fewer. And then, as you see, number four, that isolation leads to denial and disconnection. It leads to one ultimately minimizing their needs, suffering in silence, and risk almost becoming invisible in a particular community. This cycle is very dangerous. But the good news today is healthy mental health conversations on every level of church life interrupts and breaks this four-step stigma spiral. For you, clergy and pastor and lay leader, this can begin in a very small, intentional way. Maybe you preach sermons or host teaching series that outwardly name trauma, grief, or anxiety. Or maybe you open up with vulnerability and share your own journey or your self care practices to show others have the permission, just like you do from the pulpit in the pew, to break the silence because stigma only thrives in silence. So, just for a moment, here's a reflection for you to consider. What's one way that you can begin or even continue to cultivate a culture where people not only feel seen, but they feel safe and supported in their mental health journey? Now let's go to our final focus, which is perhaps the most personal, and that is self care and boundaries. This is where studies show many clergy struggle the most. Because we, as trained clergy, we are conditioned to say yes, we're trained to sacrifice, and we often can feel guilty or even selfish for stepping away. But I want to offer to you a sacred reminder that is found in Luke 5:16 that says, "But Jesus often withdrew to lonely places and prayed." Jesus took time to walk away from the crowd, to choose solitude for rest as a requirement, not as a reward. And I say the same thing to us today. Because as clergy, we must be asking ourselves consistently, what makes us think that we're any less in need of the rhythm of rest that Jesus practiced? Rest is not a retreat from our calling, but rest is reclaiming self-care as sacred care. It's reclaiming self-care that is centered as a declaration that above all, God is still God. So your healthy ministry is not marked by you consistently being available, but rather your healthy ministry is marked by sustainable means of rhythm, showcasing consistent care and honor of your body, mind, and spirit, not as machines of productivity, but as vessels of service. So this is you choosing rest over being overworked in a world that values overwork. This may be you practically taking advantage of weekly Sabbaths, the planned sabbaticals. Again, here it comes. Practices or policies that protect the well-being of yourself, that reclaim self-care as soul care, boundaries as sacred limits, and even time away as time needed. This includes for clergy saying no when necessary and not feeling guilty. This includes you normalizing time off or even designating quarterly some time for you to take a mental health break. Because even the Ten Commandments show us that the command to keep the Sabbath in Exodus 20 was about liberation from constant labor, bondage, and burnout. The truth of the matter is, God has never designed for any of us to be endlessly accessible. So it is truly boundaries that become the foundation that allow ministry to flourish with longevity and joy. So be thinking about the areas of your life where you need rest to become a spiritual practice. And also consider what's one boundary that you need to set or even reinforce for your own physical and mental health. I invite you to go to nbacares.com, .org, and look at the guided reflection prompt. And also plan to join us as we do rest practices beginning August 25th, 2025 at 1 p.m. Because this is about you centering down, searching for the sound of the genuine within, not because it's available to you, but because you deserve it. As we close this session, we have named the weight, we've explored the practical solutions, and it is my hope that this series serves to be as a catalyst for you to continue to commit to the work of building cultures of care that break the silence of stigma and choose ministry sustainability over simple survival. I want to remind you in closing that God's call on your life was never for you to burn out for the gospel, because God sees your well-being as holy ground. So receive this blessing. You who have carried much, may you be carried. You who have listened deeply, may you be heard. You who offer peace, may you find rest. And may the one who called you continue to keep you as you are well. Thank you for tuning in, and I hope that this series continues to be a blessing to you as you design systems of care and support.